Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are Jim Bernstein and Marion Blumenthal Lazan, joining me via Zoom for part of the Thaler Holocaust Fund Holocaust Remembrance Day activities. Jim is local to Cedar Rapids and has been a part of that committee and organization for some time. And Marion is our featured speaker for this year. So, first off, Marion, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in your program.
And Jim, good to see you again.
Yeah, good seeing you, Dennis. Thanks for having us on.
So there will be, not surprisingly, the Holocaust educational activities for the year will be on Zoom, and we'll give you the dates and times for when Marion is going to speak. But before Marion tells us just a little bit of her story, Jim, for those who aren't aware of the Thaler Holocaust Fund, sketch out a little bit of the background for that,
Sure.
if you would.
The fund was established in 1995, so more than 25 years ago, by Joan and David Thaler. David was a refugee from Europe, escaped Europe, and came to the United States actually before the war, and went to school here, went to medical school here, emigrated eventually to Cedar Rapids, met Joan, they got married. And because he was aware of what was going on in Europe in the mid to late 30s and throughout the 40s, and was aware of the atrocities during that time period, he and Joan were both kind of shocked and surprised that there wasn't a lot of education going on in the Midwest and specifically here in East Central Iowa. And they established the fund to um, encourage and to develop educational projects, especially for high school and middle school and college students. But since the fund's been in operation, we've expanded to provide presentations and opportunities to listen to Holocaust survivors and for the entire community to um, to be educated about the Holocaust. And so that's kind of the background. Every spring we have an event like the one we're having next week. Um, and as you know, um, pre-pandemic, the events were always in person. We always brought a Holocaust survivor or a family member of a Holocaust survivor here to Cedar Rapids for 2 or 3 days and took them to schools, Kirkwood, Coe, Mount Mercy, several of the high schools in the area for speaking engagements. But of course, uh, starting last year, we've had to do everything by Zoom. And that will be the case, as you mentioned, that'll be the case again next week.
Marion, you are a Holocaust survivor, and you've told your story. You tell your story all over the country and have for many years. And you also wrote a book called Four Perfect Pebbles that I want to find out a little bit more about later. But let's start by just kind of sketching out. Now, obviously, you were very, very young at the time of the rise of Nazi Germany, but tell me just a little bit about the experience and what happened when your family had to flee and eventually then were captured and put in a camp.
We were never really captured, but I was very young at that time. So personally, I only remember what was told to me. So we have to be careful as to the reality of what I remember and as to what was told to me. And I only remember being incarcerated really until the age of 10 when we were finally liberated. I was in the camps for various camps for 6.5 years. And I saw eventually, and that's all I knew, but I was always very protected by my parents, particularly by my mother. And I wondered why my parents were so sad, particularly my father. He had been stripped of all his dignity, and he was a wonderful provider. He was a wonderful husband and father, but all of a sudden there was nothing for him, nothing. And that sadness really uh, made me feel uh, beyond sad myself once I realized the reason why. And so that was the beginning of my. And then eventually, gradually, I was made to understand that our lives was not the normal way at all, and uh, and it was definitely my mother's inner strength and attitude towards life that helped to see me through and helped to show me that there is something better out there and we must never, ever give up hope and remain and keep that inner strength to keep going.
Your father passed away shortly after the liberation, and then your mother and a brother. Is that my
Brother, 2 year
your
older
mother and
brother.
your
Yes,
mhm, then worked hard to get to the United States. Uh, so during that time when they were working to get to the United States, what was life like? Right after the war, obviously trying to emigrate, but I'm guessing that still it was very, very difficult.
definitely. Well, my brother and I were, after liberation, my brother and I were eventually placed in a children's home in Holland. It was a youth aliyah home in preparation to live in what was then British mandated Palestine. And it we were there for my brother and I were there for 3 years, learning Hebrew and uh, learned to regain the some normalcy of life. Here I was by that time, 11 years old. You have to know that I had never been in a store. I had no idea what money was all about, had no table manners, but no food to bother with table manners. And it was like learning to live life all over again. And we were very fortunate that our surrogate parents in this home were tremendously supportive and they were strict, but very loving and caring. And I started my first formal education at that time at the age of 11 and a half in a Montessori school. And that was in Dutch, which was a foreign language for me. And because it's German that I always spoke. And because at that time in the early or in the 1947 or so, uh, parents were not permitted to accompany their children to what was then still Palestine. My mother made arrangements for our family, for my brother, and at that time, just the three of us and me to immigrate to the United States. And actually, as you'll hear me say next week, thanks to the Holland America line, we were able to use the tickets which had been purchased 10 years earlier when we initially wanted to emigrate to the United States. So
They honored tickets that were 10 years old that allowed you to come.
it was
Amazing.
amazing. Rotterdam at that time uh, was tremendously damaged during the war, and yet they had records of our tickets that had been purchased back in 1938, 39. And they were honored. So yeah,
So you came to the United States as a teenager then, and I'm sure that there were many years when you just wanted to assimilate and forget all of this and not think about it. But there came a time when you decided that it was important to start telling this story. So tell me how that came about.
forget we never did, but we also knew that talking about it would have been very destructive for us. We needed to put all that terrible, sad memory aside and go on with our lives. And in addition to that, talking about it, we didn't think anyone would believe us anyway. I mean, how could this happen? Germany at that time having been one of the most cultured nations in the world, to do this to their citizens, to innocent men, women, and children. And people wouldn't understand. So we put it aside. And it wasn't until 1979. I mean, my family knew in bits and pieces, and our background, of course. But it wasn't until 1979 when the rabbi in our synagogue here in Hewlett, New York, asked me to share my story with the congregation and members of the community. So that was a Yom HaShoah for Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I was reluctant, but I decided to sit down and write whatever I could remember. And I kept writing and I kept writing, and everything poured out. And, um, and when it finally came to present, there were teachers in the audience. And the next thing I knew, I was in their schools. And that's how it progressed from my
And
school. And I've
and
spoken to 1.5 million students and adults over the past 20 some years.
And once you got started, you never stopped. And then you also collected all those thoughts that you wrote down in the book called Four Perfect Pebbles. Now, I don't want to spoil or walk on all the things that you're going to talk about in your presentations that will be for the Cedar Rapids area, but tell me where the title Four Perfect Pebbles came from.
I was 9 or 10 years old when things were at its absolute worst in concentration camp Bergen-Belsen. We had nothing to occupy our time with constructively. No paper, no pencils, certainly no games. So I was lucky I had such an imaginative mind, and my imaginative games were always based on a positive attitude. I would search for four pebbles. And in my mind, finding those four pebbles would mean that the four members of my family would all survive. My mother, my father, my brother, and I. Was a very difficult game to play. What if I couldn't find the third or fourth pebble? Might that mean that one or two of my family members would not survive? Nevertheless, this game and other imaginary games that I was able to invent uh, helped me to see the miserable days through. And they were my survival techniques. They were my survival skills. We all have survival skills and techniques within us. When the need arises, we just have to search for them, find them, and be sure that we put them to work. No one is spared adversity. No one is spared hardship. We all have to overcome obstacles at one time or another, but with perseverance, determination, faith, and above all, hope, one can overcome just about anything and everything.
True words from Marion Blumenthal Lazan, who's going to be the Thaler Holocaust Fund speaker for the Holocaust remembrance activities in the Cedar Rapids area. Jim Bernstein from the Thaler Committee, the organizing committee. So these are going to be on Zoom. So tell me how people can get registered to participate and hear and have a conversation with Marion as a part of these activities.
Sure. Very simple. Go to holocausteducate.org. That's the website for the Thaler Fund. And the registration information is right there on the homepage. You might have to scroll down a little bit below the fold to find the buttons, but it's all there. 3 opportunities to listen and participate with Marion next week. And one other thing I want to add, Dennis, is that Marion is also going to be speaking to middle and high school students throughout Iowa on Wednesday morning, the 7th, but that is closed to the public. We're just having that open for high school students and middle school students. And so I guess I would offer, if the opportunity, if there are any high school or middle school educators out there who are interested in listening to Marion on Wednesday morning, the 7th, from 9 to 10 a.m. They should get in touch through the website. They can email us. There's a place to get in contact with us on the website. If any of your listeners are interested in that, or are high school or middle school educators, we have a lot of opportunities for that. In fact, I've heard from a middle school teacher in Anthon, Iowa, in Woodbury County, just a couple of weeks ago, and we're thankful that they're going to participate. We have also students from the Des Moines area and Mason City and Ames and throughout the state of Iowa who are going to be on that presentation with Marion.
The public events are going to be April 7th in the afternoon at 1:30, the morning of April 8th, and then no, two on the 8th, one in the morning, then and one in the afternoon.
Right.
And again, you can go to the website holocausteducate.org if you'd like more information or to get registered.
That's right. Thank you, Dennis.
And Marion's website is forperfectpebbles.com. And Marion, I want to thank you for joining me today, telling us a little bit of your story and this message of hope that you have been spreading, your whole life. And just thank you for being willing to come virtually to Eastern Iowa. I'm sorry you won't be able to be here in person, but I know that we'll be looking forward to hearing you and getting to interact with you online to talk about your experiences.
Thank you. And I must credit my husband, Nathaniel, for helping to make this happen. He's the computer guy. I don't do this technology, not very good at it. On the contrary, no, nothing. And he's amazing and tremendously supportive and has been throughout our 67 plus years of marriage. So we're very fortunate to have him by my side.
Yes. Thanks to Nathaniel for being our audio and video engineer today as well. Well, Nathaniel and Marion and Jim, thanks so much for joining me today. Again, the website is holocausteducate.org for more information on Marion's talks as a part of the Thaler Holocaust Remembrance activities. Thank you both for being with me here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dennis.
You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio most Thursdays and Fridays at 10:20 or download the podcast. Watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.